Have you ever caught yourself lying awake at night, replaying old memories in your head, things you wish you could change, mistakes you can't forget, people you still want to impress? Maybe you compare yourself to others and wonder, why am I not as confident, successful, or happy as them? We all do it. We live trapped in invisible cages built from fear, fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of not being enough. And slowly, without even realizing it, we start living for others instead of ourselves. We chase approval, chase perfection, chase happiness. Yet somehow, it always slips away. But what if I told you, your past isn't the reason you're unhappy? What if all the pain, pressure, and self-doubt you carry don't define who you are, unless you let them? Here's the truth. Happiness isn't found by being liked, praised, or accepted by everyone. Real happiness begins when you have the courage to be disliked. In this audiobook summary of The Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga, you'll discover one of the most liberating ideas ever written, inspired by the teachings of psychologist Alfred Adler. It's a philosophy that will completely change how you see yourself, your relationships, and your purpose. You'll learn why your past doesn't control your future, why most problems in life are actually interpersonal, how to stop comparing yourself to others, and how to finally live with confidence, peace, and true freedom. So if you've ever felt stuck, if you've ever wanted to change your life but didn't know how, stay till the end of this summary. Because what you're about to hear might just free you from the one thing that's been holding you back all along, the need to be liked. Deny trauma. Your past does not define you. In a quiet little town lived a young man, barely 20, with a restless mind full of questions. Like most people at his age, he was searching for meaning, trying to understand why life often felt so complicated and unfair. At the edge of that same town lived an old philosopher, known far and wide for his deep wisdom. People said he believed that life is simple and easy, a statement that baffled and even angered the young man. How could anyone say that life was simple when the world was full of pain, wars, poverty, hunger, and endless suffering? To him, the philosopher's words sounded foolish, even absurd. One day, driven by curiosity and frustration, the young man decided to confront the philosopher. He wanted to prove that his ideas were wrong. But when he finally met him, the philosopher didn't get offended or defensive. Instead, he smiled kindly, welcoming the young man with genuine warmth. He even admired the courage it took to question and think independently. The philosopher invited him inside, and thus began a long conversation that would slowly change the young man's entire understanding of life. He explained that his ideas were rooted in the teachings of Alfred Adler, a psychologist who emphasized something called individual psychology. It's a way of understanding life that focuses not on what has happened to us, but on how we choose to interpret and respond to it. At first, the young man was confused. He couldn't grasp what individual psychology truly meant. So he asked the philosopher a direct question. Do you really believe people can change their lives? Can they actually change themselves? The truth was, he wasn't asking out of mere curiosity. He was asking for himself. Deep inside, he felt inferior to everyone around him. He believed he wasn't smart enough, confident enough, or strong enough to succeed. His friends mocked him. His parents never encouraged him. And the weight of his past failures made him feel trapped. Every insecurity from childhood had grown into a heavy shadow that followed him everywhere. The philosopher listened patiently and then said something simple yet powerful. Yes, people can change if they truly wish to. Your past doesn't define you. It's over. What matters is how you live right now, in this very moment. The young man shook his head. How can you say that the past doesn't matter? He asked. Are you saying the pain I've felt, the trauma I've experienced, none of that is real? The philosopher smiled gently. I'm not denying your pain, he said, but I'm saying you don't have to be controlled by it. Alfred Adler believed that trauma is not what shapes us. What shapes us is how we choose to see our experiences. He went on to explain that while Sigmund Freud believed our present struggles come from our past wounds, Adler saw it differently. Adler taught that it's not the events themselves that hold power. It's the meaning we give them. Two people can go through the same hardship, yet one may grow stronger, while the other remains stuck. The difference lies not in the past, but in the choice each person makes about what to do with it. So, the philosopher said, your past doesn't determine who you are. You can take control of your life right now, in this very moment. You decide what kind of person you want to become. All problems are interpersonal problems. The young man still couldn't bring himself to believe the philosopher's words. The idea that the past doesn't define you felt too idealistic, too detached from reality. So he decided to keep questioning. If people can really change, he asked, then why don't they? What stops us from becoming better? Even if I forget my past and stop letting it control me, doesn't it take time to overcome what's inside me? The philosopher nodded, smiling slightly. Yes, he said, it takes time. But time isn't the problem. The real issue lies in the goal you've set for yourself. The boy frowned. What goal? The philosopher looked him straight in the eye. The goal of disliking yourself. The young man was startled. I never set such a goal, he protested. Maybe not consciously, the philosopher said gently, but think about it. What do you dislike about yourself? The young man hesitated, then began to speak. I think too negatively. I give up easily. I can't trust people. And honestly, I don't like my own personality. I don't think I'm good-looking either. I just don't feel confident. The philosopher listened quietly, studying his expression. And why do you see yourself that way? He asked. Because I've always been like this, the boy replied. Ever since I was a child, I couldn't express myself properly. I was weak. I couldn't speak up for what I believed in. The philosopher interrupted him softly. You're wrong. You've already decided that you're lacking, and that belief has shaped your reality. If you don't like yourself, what can you expect from others? When you reject yourself first, you make it easier to believe that others will reject you too. The young man went silent. Deep down, he knew the philosopher was right. His lack of confidence wasn't born from what others said. It came from his own fear of being rejected. Before anyone could dislike him, he had already decided to dislike himself. To protect himself from pain, he began to isolate. He avoided people, thinking distance would keep him safe. If he didn't talk to anyone, he wouldn't get hurt. And yet, the more he stayed alone, the lonelier he felt. What he truly wanted was love, respect, and connection, but his fear built an invisible wall between him and everyone else. The philosopher leaned forward. When you build relationships, you will sometimes get hurt. That's the truth of being human. No relationship is perfect. But if you spend your life running away from pain, you'll end up running away from people, and no one can live alone forever. He paused for a moment, then said something that shook the young man to his core. According to Adlerian psychology, every problem in life is an interpersonal problem. Behind every worry, every fear, every sense of inadequacy, there's another person involved. If you truly lived alone in this world, you wouldn't have any problems at all. The young man frowned again. That doesn't make sense, he said. How can my personal inner problems, my feelings, my self-doubt, be interpersonal? The philosopher smiled, as if expecting the question. Let me give you an example, he said. When I was younger, I used to hate my short height. People teased me about it, and I felt deeply inferior. I believed it made me less worthy. He paused and continued. But think about it. What does height actually have to do with happiness or character? Nothing. My insecurity existed only because I compared myself to others. My inferiority came not from being short, but from wanting to be like someone else. The philosopher's voice softened. You see, feelings of inferiority are subjective. They exist only in your mind. You give them meaning. And the moment you realize that, you gain power. Because how you feel about yourself is something only you can control. He smiled as he recalled an old memory. One day, a friend told me that my short height actually made me look more approachable, more trustworthy. That single comment changed the way I saw myself. What once made me insecure became something I accepted. He looked at the young man. That's the beauty of subjectivity. You can choose how to interpret your flaws. You can turn what you once called a weakness into something that gives you strength. The key is to stop treating your inferiority as a fixed truth. It's only a feeling, and feelings can be changed. The young man sat silently, lost in thought. For the first time, he began to see that perhaps his greatest struggles weren't with the world outside him, but with the way he related to it and to himself. Discard other people's tasks. Live your own life. As the evening deepened, the young man sat quietly, still wrestling with the philosopher's ideas. The more he tried to understand them, the more questions arose in his mind. The philosopher had already explained how feelings of inferiority arise through comparison with others, but now he went a step further. He said that these same interpersonal problems also steal something far more precious: our freedom. He explained that one way to heal such problems is to start seeing people as allies, not enemies. When you see others as friends, the philosopher said, your feelings of inferiority begin to fade. Friendship builds connection, and connection dissolves comparison. The young man nodded, but quickly countered with a personal example. He spoke of his parents, loving but overprotective. They had provided for him, cared for him, fulfilled every need, yet somehow he could never see them as friends. They constantly compared him to others, telling him how he was always behind. Every word of criticism, every comparison chipped away at his confidence. All my life, he confessed, I've tried to make them proud. I've done everything to win their approval. But whenever I make my own choices, they disapprove. I even studied a subject they chose for me, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want to disappoint them. And now, even though I've done what they asked, I don't feel happy. I don't even know who I am. The philosopher smiled gently. Your story isn't unique, he said. Many people spend their entire lives trying to earn the love or recognition of others, parents, teachers, friends. But Adlerian psychology rejects this idea completely. The young man looked puzzled. But isn't it natural to want praise? To be recognized? Of course, the philosopher replied. Praise feels good. Recognition feels wonderful. But ask yourself, is that your purpose in life? If you only act to be praised, You're no longer living your life. You're living someone else's. He paused and added, "This idea of living for approval is rooted in what Adler called reward and punishment education. From childhood, we are taught, do something good, and you'll be praised. Do something wrong, and you'll be punished. But if you're doing good only because of praise, or avoiding bad only because of fear, are you really free?" The young man frowned. "But if we stop caring what others think, wouldn't that make us selfish?" The philosopher smiled again. "There's an old teaching in Judaism," he said softly. "If you live your life according to others, you are living their life, not yours. You were born to live your own story. If you spend your life pleasing everyone else, who will live your life for you?" He leaned closer. "Thinking about yourself isn't selfish. It's self-respect. The key is balance, to care for others without surrendering your own life to them." The philosopher then introduced one of Adler's most powerful ideas, the separation of tasks. "This means," he explained, "learning to identify which responsibilities are truly yours and which belong to others. You can support others, but you shouldn't interfere in what is theirs to do." To illustrate, he gave an example. Imagine a child who refuses to study. His parents worry and scold him every day. But tell me, whose task is it to study well, the child's or the parent's? The young man thought for a moment. "The child's," he said. "Exactly," said the philosopher. "The moment parents make it their own task, conflict begins. The child feels pressure, resentment, and inferiority. The parents feel frustration. Both suffer. But if the parents understand that studying is the child's responsibility, they can stop interfering. They can support, but not control." The young man tilted his head, thinking hard. "But isn't it a parent's duty to guide their children? If they don't interfere, won't the child go astray?" The philosopher smiled knowingly. "That's where people misunderstand Adler's idea. Separation of tasks doesn't mean abandoning care. It means letting each person face their own responsibilities. Parents can tell a child, 'Studying is your job. We're here to help if you need guidance.' But the effort and the outcome must belong to the child," he continued. "In truth, many parents aren't trying to help their children. They're trying to protect their own image. They fear being judged by society if their child fails. So they project their desires and pride onto the child, turning them into trophies instead of individuals." The young man's eyes widened. "So you're saying even a parent's love can become control?" The philosopher nodded gently. "Love without respect becomes control. Guidance without freedom becomes interference. The healthiest relationships, whether parent and child, teacher and student, or friend and friend, are those where each person knows their own task." He leaned back and concluded, "This is the heart of Adlerian psychology. You cannot change another person's life for them. You can help, you can guide, but the decision to change must always come from within. The moment you start interfering in someone else's task, you lose your freedom and theirs." The young man sat silently, his mind spinning. For the first time, he realized that much of his suffering didn't come from what others had done to him, but from living a life that was never truly his own. Where the center of the world is. The young man leaned back deep in thought. After hearing about separation of tasks, he was starting to understand Adler's philosophy, but something still bothered him. "Philosopher," he said, "don't you think all this sounds a bit selfish? You're basically saying that we shouldn't care what others think, that we should live only for ourselves." The philosopher smiled, intrigued by his question. "That's an interesting thought," he replied. "Tell me, what do you think a selfish person is like?" The young man didn't hesitate. "A selfish person," he said, "cares only about himself. He does whatever he wants, ignores others' pain, and only acts if it benefits him. He lives for his own comfort and pleasure." The philosopher nodded slowly. "That's a common understanding," he said. "But here's the irony. People who are too concerned with what others think are also trapped by selfishness." The young man frowned. "How can that be?" "When you constantly worry about other people's opinions," the philosopher explained, "you're still thinking only about yourself. You become obsessed with how others see you, with how you appear in their eyes. You start living for approval, for recognition, for praise. That, too, is a form of selfishness." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Do you know what true freedom looks like? It's when people dislike you, and you're okay with it. When you no longer chase praise or fear judgment. You simply do what you believe is right. You act because it's your task, not because someone might clap for you." The young man listened quietly as the philosopher continued. "You must remember this. You are not the center of the world. The world doesn't revolve around you. Most people think they are the hero of everyone's story, that they must please, protect, and fix others. But that's an illusion. You are only the hero of your own life. Everyone else is the hero of theirs." The philosopher's tone softened. "So stop living for others, and stop expecting others to live for you. You may have learned to stop chasing their approval, but now you must learn something harder. Stop expecting anything from them." The young man frowned. "But what's wrong with having expectations?" "When you expect too much," the philosopher said, "you start imagining insults where none exist. You take things personally. You begin to think that everyone's actions are about you. You start believing that the world revolves around your feelings. That mindset leads to nothing but pain and disappointment." He leaned forward and said calmly, instead of asking, "What will this person give me?" ask, "What can I give to this person?" When you shift your focus from taking to giving, you stop living selfishly. You start living meaningfully. The young man fell silent again, reflecting on the philosopher's words. "According to Adler," the philosopher continued, "the only way to find lasting happiness is through a sense of belonging, by connecting with your community. When you contribute to others, when you become useful to the people around you, your life gains meaning. Humanity is like an ocean made up of many drops. Alone, you are just a drop, but together you become part of something vast and powerful." The young man nodded slowly. "So, community means the people around us, our neighborhood, our town, our society." "Yes," the philosopher replied, "but it's not limited to that. A community can be anywhere you feel a sense of connection. Your school, your workplace, your family, even a circle of friends. Every place where you share purpose and belonging is a community." He paused, his voice thoughtful. "But problems arise when we tie our entire self-worth to a single community. When you define your whole identity by one group, you lose perspective. You become dependent on it, and that dependence gives birth to insecurity." He looked at the young man and said, "Imagine a student who believes that his school is his entire world. He measures his worth only by his grades and reputation within those four walls. When he scores low, he feels worthless. That single failure becomes a lifelong burden." The philosopher's eyes softened. But life isn't confined to one small circle. We belong to many communities, our families, our workplaces, our friendships, and humanity itself. When you realize that you're part of something larger, small setbacks lose their power. You see that a low grade, a rejection, or a criticism doesn't define you. It's just one moment in one small part of your much bigger life. He smiled warmly. When you stop seeing yourself as the center of the world, you start to see how big and beautiful the world truly is. The young man sat silently, looking out the window. For the first time, he felt the weight of his worries lift, replaced by a quiet understanding that freedom wasn't about escaping others, but about connecting with them in the right way. Conclusion. So, what does it really mean to have the courage to be disliked? It means freeing yourself from the endless prison of other people's opinions. It means realizing that your worth isn't defined by your past, your achievements, or anyone's approval, but by how bravely you live your own truth today. From this book, we learn that the past does not define us. Our attitude does. That every problem in life is an interpersonal one, shaped by how we connect with others. That true confidence begins the moment we stop comparing, stop pleasing, and start contributing. We learn to separate our tasks from others, to focus on what's truly ours to control, and let go of the rest. To live not for praise, but for purpose, and to remember that we are not the center of the world, but part of something larger, a community, a shared humanity. In a world obsessed with validation and social approval, the courage to be disliked offers something radical, peace through self-acceptance. It reminds us that happiness isn't given by others. It's created by how we choose to think, live, and love. So stop waiting for permission. Stop living for applause. Start living for yourself. Because only when you are free from the need to be liked will you finally discover the joy of simply being. If this message touched your heart, stay curious and keep growing. Listen to it again whenever you feel lost. And remember, courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the quiet decision to be yourself, no matter what others think. You've been listening to The Courage to be Disliked, summarized by Audiobook 101. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe, share this video with someone who needs it, and check out our other summaries of life-changing books on success, mindset, and happiness. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and never stop becoming the hero of your own story.